Morning, everyone. This is Sue Ann from the State Unit on Aging. I want to welcome you to another webinar in our series of webinars for this year. I want to remind you guys that we will keep you muted, so if you have questions, please text chat your question. And that is my whole reason for being here today, is to watch those questions. We have several other folks in the room. I also want to remind you that if you have a group site, please, in the text chat, let us know who else is there so we can make sure that everybody gets credit for being here today. And at the very end of the webinar, just after it's over, we will pull an attendee list and send you an email with a SurveyMonkey link so you can let us know what you thought of the webinar today. So watch for that email from Lori Watt right after the webinar is over. We are recording the webinar. And that's all I have at this point, so I'm going to turn it over to Nikisha Knight-Coyle, who is our ADRC Grants Manager.
Great. Thank you, Sue Ann. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Veterans Directed Home and Community-Based Services in Oregon webinar. Okay, I'm being asked to hold on. Just 1 second, everyone.
Oh, is it star one?
Usually it's just we're on the air.
It's still on hold. Press star one to start the broadcast. So that's not star one.
Oh, star one. Sorry.
Does that make a difference?
Why would you do it on the phone? Wouldn't you do it on?
Oh.
No, it's not here. It's that.
You could try it on there, I guess.
Well, I'm pushing the red button that I always push, and that's not working.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, start over.
Okay, hi everybody. This is Sue Ann Jackson from the State Unit on Aging. Just a little technical difficulty this morning getting our sound to you guys. Thanks to Lee, we got you there. We want to welcome you to this newest webinar in the 2014 State Unit on Aging series. And I want to remind you guys that we will keep you muted because there's quite a few of you on the line at this point. So we will keep you muted. We want to remind you to watch for an email from Lori Watt directly after the webinar is finished, and you will have a link to a SurveyMonkey evaluation so you can let us know what you thought of the webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, and it helps us for the next one to know what you think and how that's working for you. We are recording this webinar, and we will record the whole thing and post it on the SUA website. It usually takes a few days to get up there. We usually put the webinar and any materials that we sent out ahead of time. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Nikisha Knight-Coyle, who is our Grants Manager for the ADRC.
Thank you, Sue Ann. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Veterans Directed Home and Community-Based Services in Oregon webinar. My name is Nikisha Knight-Coyle, and as Sue Ann said, I manage our state's Aging and Disability Resource Connection, otherwise known as ADRC grant. Okay, so I'm here with a number of folks around our panel, and I'd like to introduce them. We have Lee Girard, who is the Community Services Manager with the Multnomah County Aging and Disability Services Division. We have Jeannie Butler, who is the Senior Program Coordinator with the Washington County Area Agency on Aging. We also have Lynn Shimmer-Bellew, who is the Community Services Program Supervisor at the Multnomah County Aging and Disability Services Division. And then we also have Jennifer McKenzie, who is the Home and Community-Based Services Director with the Portland Veteran Administration's Medical Center. Okay. Okay, so Jennifer's not with us. So let's move on to the next slide. So for today, I just want to go over, here we go. So here you see the topics that we're planning on covering during today's webinar. We're going to begin with just a brief statement on why we're here, what the learning objectives are. We'll then look at sort of how do you get a Veterans-Directed Home and Community-Based Services program up and running. We'll then talk about day-to-day operations, some lessons learned and sustainability from our existing programs here in the metro area. We'll talk about some next steps, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Now, in order for you all to get your questions answered, you will have to use the chat box, I believe as Sue Ann just mentioned. Okay? So let's put the... We'll just keep going. So why are we here? This webinar is in response to many inquiries that we've received from the field about what the whole Veterans-Directed Home and Community-Based Services program is. Some of you may know that as a part of our current Enhanced Options Counseling grant, that there's a requirement for us to expand what we call VD-HCBS services statewide. So what we're in the process of doing is building upon the infrastructure already developed in our Multnomah and Washington County areas. Again, so the real purpose behind this is to give you an idea of what VD-HCBS is, what some of the work is being done currently in these counties that already have the program, and this is really just an informational session for you all. So the learning objectives are to augment your knowledge about Veterans-Directed Home and Community-Based programs and identify the steps to developing VD-HCBS from the perspective of 2 existing sites in Oregon. So again, welcome. Again, keep your questions coming. If you have anything, you feel free to include them in the chat section. And I hope you enjoy the next hour and a half or so. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie Butler, who's going to sort of jumpstart this, what VD-HCBS is.
Good morning. This is Jeannie. Thank you for joining us today. Looking at the list of attendees, I know that some of you have some idea of veteran-directed overall, maybe from attending some of the national programs or conferences, and then also hearing us talk about it. We've been working on looking at a statewide expansion, so this webinar was intended to give you a really high-level view of what we're doing here locally in the metro area with veteran-directed, and then potentially have you look at building these programs in your own area. So if you have questions, please let me know. I'll try to not move too quickly through the slides. But what is veteran-directed home and community-based services? In the metro area, we are able to serve veterans of any age, and those folks are determined by the Veteran Administration to be at risk of nursing facility placement. Locally, that means that our partner at the VA Medical Center is looking at veterans who have significant ADL needs or maybe some cognition issues that they look to have care needs in their homes, and or potentially, for our purposes, they were on a home health type list where they weren't able to be served under their current funding, so we were able to serve them under veteran-directed home and community-based services. These veterans that were eligible truly are self-directed. They need to either be able to direct the care themselves or have a representative who could assist them in directing their own care. What's unique about this service is that they're able to purchase a mix of goods and services, as is indicated in this slide. But to give you an idea of some of the services that were really unique to this program, people were able to buy lift chairs or lift vans to help them be more independent in the community. Essentially, in the veteran-directed program, the VA medical centers are purchasing services from the AAAs. They're paying us to provide case management services and to help the veterans to direct their own care. Next slide, please. So the very first step for us was really finding the right people. We were able to bring in our local partners at the VA Medical Center in Vancouver, and if Jennifer McKenzie is on the line, she was a huge part of getting this started. We worked with the Administration on Community Living and our partners at the federal level to really dig into what is veteran-directed, who do we need to have at the table, and having that conversation really early on. So anyone who's looking at potentially building this program in their area, having someone internally at those VA medical centers is crucial. Next slide, please. Step 2, do your homework. For those of you that have not visited the ADRC Technical Assistance website, I encourage you to do so. They obviously have ADRC information, options counseling information, but they also have an entire page on veteran-directed home and community-based services, and it really digs into what is consumer direction and what does it mean within this program. So looking at that website, there's a lot of resources from Oregon and all of the other sites who are active in the United States. Definitely talking with other veteran-directed sites about their experiences, some of which will be challenges that they've experienced, and we've experienced some of those locally. But I think that you would hear them echo the same themes, is really having everybody on board and having the support of your VA Medical Center was crucial to getting started. Working with your technical assistance leads, with your peers. When we were starting veteran-directed, we worked with some of our peers in Washington State, and were able to look at their readiness review, able to look at their contract for financial management services, which we'll talk about here in a few slides, and then looking at what is a readiness review and what do we need to even bring to the table to start this program, and we'll talk a little bit about that also in a few more slides. Next slide, please. So I touched on this a bit, really establishing that mutual buy-in, talking with your VA Medical Center, making sure that they understand the program. Not only does the AAA need to do some homework and look at what's happening nationally with veteran-directed, but the VA Medical Center really needs to understand what this program is as well. The folks that are potentially, or the veterans that are potentially on lists with these different VA Medical Centers, wait lists for services, they have historically received case management and home health type services where they're prescribed almost. They come into the veteran's home and they say, this is what you're going to get and this is what we're able to offer. Very different in this programming. The VA Medical Center needs to understand that the veteran is really at the helm. They are deciding what services they're wanting in their home, and they're leading their care plan in lieu of the VA Medical Center leading their care plan. Next slide. And I touched on this a bit in getting started as well, but really working with your federal partners. They have a wealth of information. Sometimes they have the ear of some of the folks at the federal VA central office that can potentially help you with getting this program started. Dan Sheps is our VA federal contact at the central office in Washington, D.C., and he and Patrick O'Keefe truly are your primary contact for veteran-directed. They really manage the budgets federally and nationally for this program, and without their support and communicating with them, you are not able to start the program. Kevin Foley is with the Administration on Community Living, and he works very closely with this program. We also work with Roger Auerbach as technical assistant. So there's a wealth of federal partners, all of whom should be listed on the technical assistance website as well under veteran-directed home and community-based services. Determine your reimbursement rates. In our programming, we, the VA Medical Center essentially received information from the VA central office or the federal central office about how much money was going to be available for the first 2 years of the program. In startup for this program, it was intended to have 2 years of funding, and then there was agreement that we would look at other sustainable sources of income or payment for this program. So knowing what your budget's going to look like, and that's truly your VA Medical Center partner who would be communicating with the VA central office. Finding that sustainable payment ongoing is a challenge for this program. The VA Medical Center works kind of retrospectively in their funding, so that has been a challenge for our program here, at least locally, and we're still looking to determine what are our budgets going to be moving forward. The reimbursement rates currently in our agreement with the VA Medical Center, we have 4 tiers that the veterans are paid under, and those tiers are based on the veterans' needs or activities of daily living. So they can go as high as $3,600 and as low as around $1,700, and that's a service budget that the veteran is able to choose, again, services and goods that will help to keep them independent. But there are new rate structures that are being implemented this year, actually, where it will have an A through K rate structure. So there'll be significant variables that will either put them at K, where they have very, very high needs, or A, where they have some lower needs. In that complete rate, that reimbursement rate, the administrative fee for the AAA comes out, as well as any contracted rate that you would need to pay to your financial management service, and we'll talk about that just here in a bit. So pass a readiness review. Sounds pretty simple. It is not. It is a very lengthy document. And in the next slide, we'll look at the very first page of the readiness review. But what it really is it's the AAA doing a self-assessment. It's looking at comprehensively what's our case management structure, what kind of experience do we bring to the table in self-direction, in case management, in doing assessments of people with activity of daily living needs. And it looks as though the readiness review is changing a bit. The outline of it has changed a bit since we did the readiness review, but that is a document that you will also need to have technical assistance on. When we did our readiness review, we had Boston College that was our technical support. Now it looks like it's Diana Kayela, and she's also from Boston College, but she will work with each site to go through the readiness review and make sure that you're answering all the questions in a comprehensive way, and that you're coming out with the 4 products that they're requiring, which is here on the next slide. But again, a copy of the readiness review, if you go to the technical assistance website, under Veteran-Directed Home and Community-Based Services, you can search for readiness review, and it will pull up the new tool so that you can look at what types of questions you'll be needing to answer. When we did our readiness review, we had our VA Medical Center at the table. We had all of the AAAs that were going to be working in the program, as well as the veteran service coordinators that were going to be working in the program. And we worked on the readiness review for about 6 months. And that is a back and forth conversation with Boston College. It's getting the administration on community living involved. The VA Medical Center is highly involved. And just making sure that you are going to be able to really help these veterans direct their own care, and that you have the experience to build the program. So, next slide. So at the end of the readiness review, you have 4 products that you need to be able to show moving forward that you'll use in implementing veteran-directed home and community-based services. One is a functional assessment. When we work with our local VA Medical Center, we used the CAPS tool and looked at that paper CAPS tool, going through, what means full assistance for us in mobility, and then what does the VA Medical Center consider full assistance mobility, and really crosswalking what they were using for their home health assessments and what we're using in the CAPS functional assessment. So you'll need to have a decision between the VA Medical Center and the AAA is what's the functional assessment and how are we determining the needs of these veterans. The second product is a spending or service plan template. We were able to, our financial management, they ended up implementing And it really is a template that shows here's the veteran's need, this is how they intend to fulfill that need and what they're going to spend some of their budget on moving forward. A program and policy manual, which was extensive. I don't know that ours has ever truly gotten out of draft form, but it is the document that we use. And it's probably 40-some pages long, really talking about the ins and outs of the program, how we're going to work with the financial management service, and what types of services the veterans are and are not able to purchase to meet their needs. It's really a self-directed manual. We've tweaked it for some of our other programs, at least in Washington County, but it's the Veterans Manual, a how-to guide, how they are going to direct their own care, build their own budget, and meet their needs by their choices, and then how to interview potential home care workers, how to hire and fire potential home care workers. Just a really nice self-directed manual that we're happy to share with any of the other sites moving forward. Next slide. See in some of the questions, I know it's very small type, but it really talks about what's your collective experience in participant direction, and if you go to the technical assistance website, you can view the entire tool, and it really helps you to prepare who needs to be at the table when we start this readiness review, and what types of information do we need to gather before we even get started in the conversation. Next slide. So once you're approved with your readiness review, you're going to need to negotiate a provider agreement. This is generally initiated by the VA Medical Center. It's a provider agreement that is their provider agreement with the aging network, and the provider agreement really outlines the policies and procedures in communication, how the goods and services are going to be provided by the AAA. It talks about the eligibility criteria for the veterans, and then it lists out the rate structure that you, as a AAA, as the provider, will be providing services to that VA Medical Center on behalf of the veteran. Next slide, please. Oh, you're fine. So I had Lynn help me to insert a picture of the provider agreement. Not great quality, unfortunately, and this also will be changing. We're working with our local VA Medical Center to get a copy of the new provider agreement. This is updated annually, goes through a full contracting process, but again, really highlights what's the eligibility criteria, what are we agreeing to provide, how often are we going to invoice, and how the VA Medical Center will be paying us for the services that we provide. So once all of that is in place, you passed your readiness review, you have your provider agreement, which is essentially your contract with the VA Medical Center, and now it's time to start moving forward. The veterans start having monies come into your AAA, and what are you going to do with that money? You can go to the next slide, please, Suzanne. So you'll need to think about what type of financial management service model do you want to use. In the metro area, we chose to use a vendor, and ours is Public Partnerships, LLC. They have been working with self-directed models for many years, and nationally they work with DD providers or DD agencies to help those developmentally disabled clients direct their own care. We looked at what the options were. You can choose to provide that financial management service yourself as a AAA, but essentially you receive the budgets for your veterans. They come into your agency. You would take out your case management fee. You would take out your administration fee. And then you have this large pot of money that would be specifically for the veterans' goods and services. So not only would you be paying home care workers potentially, as we do in other Medicaid programs and other like OPI programs, but you would need to make the veteran an employer. So he could have 5 home care workers or 5 support brokers that you would have to pay. The tax that's involved in and helping the veteran be an employer was significant, so we chose to contract that service out. It's a nominal fee, and it's very negotiable. It varies nationally, so it's a model that you'd need to look at. We did an RFP to get our financial management service, and we only had a few people that threw their hat in the ring for to potentially provide the service. But I know that there are other vendors that have come online as Veteran Directed has gone more national, and as self-direction seems to have become more prominent and more of a force nationally. So that is the extent of my slides. Does anybody have any questions, or do you want to? I'm not seeing any questions yet. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Shemmer-Ballou.
Okay, thank you. Day-to-day directed home and community-based service program. Washington County and Multnomah, we did bring on board most of the day-to-day operations of the program. If we go to the next slide, you can see kind of the basic list of all that's involved in the day-to-day operations. There's assessments of the veterans as they're coming in new to the program, and then ongoing assessments throughout their time in the program. The case management piece, there's a monthly task of approving their spending plans. Invoicing, it's looking at the invoicing for the public partnership for the fiduciary for the program, as well as preparing invoices for the VA to get reimbursed for the costs. There's ongoing support for the veterans who are in the program, as well as their family members and their support people who are helping them. And then ongoing communication with Jennifer, the VA Home and Community-Based Service Director. So next slide. The veteran direction has 2 basic features. So the veteran is the employer, the authority of this program, and sometimes if they do not have capacity or if they're going to delegate that to someone else, that's the employer of record, and that's who is leading and directing this process once it's determined what their spending level is going to be each month, which level of service they're going to be receiving. Then the authorities. So they work within their spending plan to spend money and to work with the folks that they're going to have on their team to meet all of their needs. So if we go on to the next slide, the really important piece for the case manager in the program and for the veterans who are coming on board and ongoing in the program is that piece of self-direction. This is the whole critical component, the core feature of the program. The veteran has choice. They're in control of how they're going to be using their monthly budgets, who their employer, what type of their budget each month. The case manager that comes on board really has to be the champion of that important feature as they're talking to new veterans who are considering coming on board for the program and ongoing as they're working with the veteran and their family and their support. If we could go to the next slide. So again, that case manager is providing orientation to the veteran and really talking with them as they're coming on board with the veteran and with other folks that they may want to have present as part of their support team to explain what this involves. So it's very important. They have to understand the responsibilities. They are the employer of record. Everything from the monthly hours that their employee is entering to if there's a workers' comp claim. We did have this with one of the veterans where their employee did sustain an injury, and so it's working through that workers' comp process that the veteran has to provide that employee with that paperwork if there's going to be a workers' comp claim. It can sometimes be scary and a little overwhelming. In this case, the veteran's wife, who was an elderly woman, was the person of record, and she did have some good support through adult children to get through this process, but it can be kind of scary. So that case manager needs to be there up front to fully explain the whole process of the veteran direction piece and what it means to be the employer of record, and then ongoing as the person is on the caseload to really help support them through any hiccups that may come about, change of staff, things like that, workers' comp claim. On to the next slide. This is some good information about the program service principles, and these are things that we incorporated into our manual for the program, as well as the manual that we give to the veterans and to their families. These are really important. Again, there's a lot of heavy emphasis here on self-determination, self-direction, the whole, how very comprehensive this program is. There's a lot of emphasis on that. And then a critical point, if you go down to the second to last bullet point, another component of this program is really wanting to prevent duplication of service. We want to maximize the benefits from this program, and we want to make sure that there's not any duplication of service going on. Again, the veterans' care is the primary focus here, and the final bullet, which is talking about making sure that this program is not giving any inappropriate gain for a service provider for a family member. Those family members and other employees that are working for the veteran and getting paid for the program, obviously we're wanting to make sure that they're really doing what they're supposed to be doing. They are providing the care based on the service plan that's created, the needs that this veteran has, making sure that these employees, whether it be a family member, a neighbor, a professional that they're hiring as a caregiver, that they're really providing the service that is intended and that is approved in that service plan. So these funds are being used very efficiently and effectively, and that there's some good fidelity in the program, that it's meeting its intention. If we go on to the next slide, we'll talk about the assessment. So again, Jeannie had mentioned that we're using the CAPS assessment as the functional assessment to determine the service level for the veterans that are in our program. And so our case manager will go and do a CAPS assessment. Do we have a question, Sue Ann?
Yeah. When you refer to the AAAs, do you mean as an individual agency or as the lead in the ADRC? When you're talking about AAAs in this program, as you're talking about them. And you might want to repeat it.
So the question is, someone had asked a question about referring to the AAAs if you're talking about an individual agency or the lead in the ADRC. Is that correct? Okay.
In the context of it.
Okay. So Lee's going to take this question.
Okay. And this question, I think, needs to be responded to in a local planning process. Because really what's happening, and Nikisha's going to spend some time at the end of the webinar talking about next steps, but as we're looking at expansion out for this program, I think that what needs to happen is that the local VAs, medical centers, and the local partners in that area need to come together and decide how it's going to be organized, and that includes which components of the AAAs or ADRCs are going to be involved in it. So it's not really one or the other. The way it's developed in the metro area is we've viewed this as a component of our ADRC development, but right now not every partner in our ADRC is involved in this program. So probably both.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, so back to the slide. We're talking about the assessment, both new and then ongoing reassessments. The goal of the assessment is to identify and document the veterans' needs, goals, and their preferences. Again, the whole veterans-directed piece is very prevalent here. And that the information gathered, that's going to see what is used to build the spending plan. So that's going to determine which level of spending they're going to be in, and then how that spending is going to be done each month. And it's going to feed the process of creating the veteran spending plan, which is on the next slide. So this is, again, a function of the case manager. They're going to work with the veteran to build this spending plan. And it's going to, that will then determine what type of care they need, they're going to use, how many employees they're going to be bringing on board. The case manager will be there to help guide them through that process and empower the veteran or their designee to act as that authority, that hiring authority, to go through that process. Let's see. I'm trying to think on this slide. The veteran also receives a copy of the spending plan when it is determined. And there'll be a lot of communication at this point also with the VA Medical Center, the Home and Community-Based Service Liaison. And so we'll have some good dialogue going on with Jennifer McKenzie through this process to get that veteran spending plan in place. And if we go on, before we move on to the next slide, this is again where we're going to be looking at where we want to make sure that this budget is very efficient. And so if there are some services through the Aging Network that can be connected that's not going to be coming out of this budget, such as maybe home-delivered meals, if there's already resources in the community that the veteran can take advantage of, perhaps it's a veteran transportation program or things like that, where those resources can be used in that way rather than coming out of this monthly budget. So that's another important component for the case manager to be doing, is to really know the community that the veteran lives in and knows what resources and services are available outside of this program to kind of help augment and support this budget. So that's an important piece covered in the last couple of bullet points here on this slide. So moving on, so once the spending plan is determined, it needs to be set up in the, we call it the portal, which is where the hours and the money is tracked through the financial management service. So when a veteran is new and then ongoing each month, the case manager will go into the portal to update the spending plan. When there's a reassessment, perhaps the veteran is going to be moving to a higher care level tier, and therefore the budget will be updated. The portal will be updated that month to reflect that change in spending. It could be each month if there's a change in the employee, and might be a shift in how the money is going to be spent. Perhaps the veteran has had surgery, and so this month they may need some additional in-home care hours. So the budget money will be shifted from another category over to in-home care to support that person as they're recovering from surgery. It could be that the veteran is going to use some of their rainy day funds for an approved goods or services or some approved home modifications. We've had veterans who have used the money to make their home a little bit more accessible. We've had veterans who have used some of their money to purchase some durable medical equipment, or one veteran wanted to purchase a high-low table to help her do some of her physical therapy exercises. It was easier for her to transfer to this high-low table rather than onto the floor from her wheelchair to do some of those things. We have a veteran right now who is going to be purchasing a new refrigerator. He stores his medications in his refrigerator and using some of the budget money for that. So those are all things that get managed in this financial management system in the portal each month to approve those budgets. Again, the case manager is working with the veteran or their designee to make sure that any of those special purchases are approved and are appropriate for the program, and then also managing the monthly allocation of hours for the employees. And Sue Ann is letting me know we have a question.
So I think you may have answered part of this, but someone asked if you could talk briefly about the age range for participating veterans, the main needs and services that people have helped them get, and then approximately how many veterans can be served by one case manager.
So this is Lynn speaking for Multnomah County. Okay, so the question was around age range of veterans that we're serving, types of services that they are needing, and caseload for the case manager. So our age range varies. We do have some younger veterans in the program. Most of our veterans, though, are 60 plus, and a couple of them are quite a bit older than that. And their needs vary. We have personal care hours. We have yard maintenance hours approved. We have homemaker house cleaning services approved. Some of the veterans choose to use adult day services or an adult daycare program. We have had some approval for short-term respite. In the case of our elderly couple, the wife is the employer of record. They had a lapse in service of having a home care worker that they liked, and so they used a respite provider for a short term while they were looking for a longer term solution for a home care worker to come in. So it can be pretty flexible and varied. Our program is small, so we have not reached the upward capacity of caseload issues. So I don't have a good answer for that.
And this is Lee. One of the things I'll be talking about sustainability of your program in a little bit, and I will talk about how you cost out the program and support a position and things, challenges around that, and what you need to do for that. So that might address some of your caseload issues.
But I think we have determined, this is Jeannie, that about 50 cases was a caseload, full-time, one full-time FTE, because there's a lot more engagement with the Veteran Service Coordinator or the case manager. Normal Medicaid or OPI, generally you're seeing them once a year, maybe once every 6 months you touch base. These veterans, because they are self-directing, tend to be a lot more engaged and have a lot more questions for the case managers. And then anytime there's an issue with their payment to their home care workers, you're empowering them to work with the financial management service, but we've experienced that there's just a lot more engagement with the veterans, so smaller caseloads.
Okay, so going on to the next slide, ongoing coaching and support for the veteran. So this is a big piece for the case manager, and what Jeannie was just speaking to kind of goes along with this slide. Ongoing onboarding a new veteran and their support team into the program, and then ongoing for veterans who've been in the program for a while. They do require quite a bit of help and support around the employer, being the employer of record issue. So the case manager does spend quite a bit of time making sure that they are oriented to this in the beginning, and then working them through different processes and systems as they're ongoing in the program. So this is, again, very important. Some of the veterans perhaps have not been in a self-directed program, and so they might be more used to kind of more traditional case management style where the case manager is doing a lot of the work. And so it can be a shift, and it's something that needs to be considered when starting up the program, and then ongoing management of cases, veterans in the program coming on board new and ongoing through their time in the program. The last slide I'm going to talk about here for the day-to-day operations is just a few other components of the day-to-day operations. Satisfaction surveys is an important piece for the veteran or the employer of record if they have designated someone else for that position, and also for the employees who are working for the veterans. Wanting to get feedback about how is the third party, the fiscal agent for the program, how is that working? How easy is it to go into the portal to enter your hours in and things like that? So really wanting to get some satisfaction surveys about the program to help guide you in the early stages and then ongoing management of the program. Disenrollment for a veteran, if they're no longer appropriate for the program, if the self-management, self-direction aspect of the program turns out to not be appropriate for a veteran, not the right fit based on their needs and their support that they have. So you would go through the disenrollment process. Reassessments, I talked about that a little bit. Helping to find support or respite care as needed, that can come up. Helping if there's a workers' comp claim, I covered that. And then also working with the veteran if they are going to be using some of their funds to make a purchase, an approved and appropriate purchase and or a home modification. And so working with them through that process, approving the request, and then all the way through coordinating payment for the vendor or for the product that's purchased. Sue Ann, are there any questions?
There is one that Lee's going to.
Okay.
So there is one question about whether or not the veterans are eligible for the STEPS program. And for those of you that don't know about the STEPS program, it is a program that's eligible for Medicaid long-term care clients and OPI clients. And there are contracts with a variety of community partners across the state who really train the client to on their role as the employer. In this case, the veterans aren't eligible specifically for STEPS. However, in developing the program, what we did, we actually had some grant funds initially. We worked with and contracted actually with our local independent living center, which was Independent Living Resources. And working with them, we developed a guide that is available for, and it uses a lot of the same foundational concepts that are used in the STEPS program. So there's a guide that can be shared with the veteran and their supports. And also that is a type of service. It wouldn't specifically be the STEPS program, but the veteran may choose to basically hire that kind of a training service as part of their spending plan. So, there is the potential for that, and one of the things that we can always look at is there's some potential trials that might happen in the near future with being able to, for there to be some specific purchasing of the STEPS program in an area. So there is a potential, but the veteran has to choose to do it and also has to utilize their budget for that. So, okay. So this is Lee Gerard, and we're moving on to the next section of the training, which is really addressing sustainability and lessons learned.
So there's a question about whether they can use in-home agencies.
Okay, so the question about using in-home agencies. There is only one time or one situation where they can use in-home agencies, and that's as part of their backup emergency plan. If they need an in-home agency ongoing, it's not considered by the VA or by the Administration for Community Living to meet the standards for participant directed. So they would, if they were going to need in-home supports ongoing from an in-home care agency, then they would need to work with the local, their VA medical center to access one of their other programs.
And this is Lynn, and kind of a practical application of that. We had one of our veterans, and it was the veteran who also had a workers' comp claim going on. So their primary in-home caregiver, who was the couple's neighbor, injured herself, and the wife was not able to take on all of the physical needs of her husband. So we used respite care agency, an agency to provide some services in the home, while the couple and their adult daughter was looking for a replacement person to become an employee to take on the in-home care needs for the veteran. So they worked with the case manager for the program, who was then also coordinating with Jennifer McKenzie to get that all approved, and so that the agency could get paid, and putting a cap how many hours and what was needed.
Okay, now looking at sustainability and lessons learned. First, the area of sustainability for the program. One of the things you'll want to think about is that this is not a really large program. And depending upon the budgets that we're able to develop in partnership with the VA Medical Center will really give you a sense locally about what's the capacity and the size that your program is going to be developing in your area. A good example is that in our area, we originally were anticipating having between 40 and 50 clients between our two counties. We do not currently have that level right now. We have, I believe, about 15 people that are on the program between the two counties. So there can be some challenges with the budget, and you need to be really upfront and know that. One of the things that Nikisha will talk about later is that as we're planning the expansion, that's one of the key questions that will need to be answered. So understanding what size the program may be in your area, I think, will be a key question that you'll want to answer in thinking about sustainability, and you'll want to structure your program around that so that you can have some flexibility as you move forward with implementing the program. Another area which is not something that we're used to in our system, in our network, is that to maintain this program, you will need some operating reserves to manage within the VA's payment time frames. Generally, we're about 90 days out in getting reimbursed by the VA. We've worked really, really closely with their systems, and we've worked through a lot of issues around the payment processing system because this was a new program for the VA when we initially started it. We've got some really good things that we've worked out, and I think that everybody will benefit from those lessons learned. But the reality is it still takes a good 90 days to get reimbursed. And in the meantime, you're having to front the funding for your service coordinator, for the administration, for the costs to the financial management service, and for all of the services. So that budget that the veteran gets actually gets paid to the financial management service. You have to pay that up front. So you have to take that into consideration, and depending upon the organizational model that's developed in each local area, that's something that, whether it's the local entities taking that on or a lead agency, you have to take that into consideration. You also cannot underestimate the administrative processing and oversight for the program. And that really happens at all levels for the program. You know, I think that both Jeannie and Lynn did a really good job of describing both getting ready for the program and then the day-to-day operations. But there is a significant amount of administrative work that happens at all levels. A good example is that the service coordinator is going to spend more time tracking and filling out forms. They're going to be spending more time filling out budgets and forms and different kinds of things than they're probably used to, even if they did Medicaid services. So it's more burdensome than that. There's going to be a different kind of administrative burden than they're probably used to. And then they're going to probably do the preliminary, do that preliminary setting up the invoicing that goes to the VA every month. And that there's specific forms that have to be used. You have to convert the monthly budget into a daily rate. And then once that's been submitted and the payment comes back in, you have to have a very good tracking system in place and do a lot of reconciliation. There's also reconciliation that needs to happen. You're going to be fronting funding to the financial management service. and you'll have to do a quarterly reconciliation against what actually gets paid out by that financial management service. It's helpful if your organization has had some experience. For instance, if you have, in Multnomah County, we're fortunate in that we have worked in the developmental disability system, working with financial management services. So for our accounting unit, this was not a new kind of service. But if you don't understand those things, you may want to do some research and find out how to do that, what that component means. The other reality is that the VA systems, with their payment systems, there are some issues where you have to do a lot of reconciliation back and tracking to make sure that all of the payments happen accurately every single month. And there is a bit of tracking that has to happen with that. We have some very good tools that we're willing to share with people, but the tools will help you, but they don't negate the need to do a lot of reconciliation. Also, I think both Washington County and Multnomah County had the experience of kind of recognizing partway through the implementation of our program that we needed to have more flexible staffing model for the service coordinators. You're probably going to start out small with having just a few clients, and if you're able to, you'll probably have a plan to expand that, but you're probably not going to be getting enough funding initially to like hire a new FTE. So you'll need to kind of look at your staffing capacity and figure out if you can implement this in a way that provides some flexibility. That said, you also, it probably is not going to work really well if you try to spread this workload across multiple staff. And the reason for that is that it does take, I think Lynn did a very good job of describing the differences of this type of program versus many of the other programs that we're used to doing. And there will be a big learning curve, and people won't get into the kind of the routine of how to implement the program if you've got just one or two people that you're providing services to. So consolidating it into one position is probably going to be the most helpful. And so looking at lessons learned, these are some things that can really help you as you start with your planning and having your discussions locally and then move into implementation. Really take time to understand the VA systems. One thing to understand is it isn't just one system that you're working with within the VA. You've got your local VA medical center partners. Having good champions and having good communication and relationships with your local VA medical center partners is going to be your first and probably most important understanding how the larger picture works within the VA. You've got the VA Medical Center network, and so in the state we've got several different VA medical centers, and what that's going to look like across the state may actually vary from VA Medical Center to VA Medical Center. Many other states have had that experience where the relationships may vary just a little bit by center. Then you need to recognize that most of the program guidance is coming from Washington, D.C., from the Central VA Medical Center. There was a reference that Jeannie made to Dan Sheps and to Patrick O'Keefe. They're actually at the federal level. And the communication that comes out from them, it's really going to be kind of overarching communication. It may or may not filter down in a way that we're used to seeing through the bureaucracy. So there can be some challenges there, and what I would suggest is you need to be patient and you need to have lots and lots of communication with your VA partners. And then recognize we're very fortunate because over the VA medical centers there's a regional network. And I can never remember what the business stands for, but I believe it's the Veterans Integrated Service Networks. And we are very fortunate. Amy Reno is the manager for our VISN in our region, and she is a true champion of this program. So that will be very helpful for us in having that her as a champion. But that is another level that you have to consider. And if you incorporate that up front in your planning, it will help you a lot. And then the final component of kind of the system is the regional payment center, which is separate from your VA medical center. And it took us a little while. I'll confess, it took us a little while to figure that out. So, and Jennifer McKenzie, who is our partner here at our VA Medical Center, will tell you, oh yes, we're very separate. They're actually in kind of the same campus, but they are considered very separate parts of the VA system. And we sometimes will have to get together. It's almost like a three-legged stool where we're trying to problem solve around some of the payment issues, and it really takes getting all three components of the VA Medical Center representation, the VA Payment Processing Center, us, and then sometimes the VISN, actually, on conference calls or even in the same room to work through challenges. So as you start to experience those things, one of the things I would recommend is keep asking who isn't at the table, and also feel free to check in with us because we've had some experiences trying to figure out how to solve some of these problems. Another lesson learned is really to understand that the payment mechanism for this program is different than what you're used to. We're used to either getting grants or having a cost-based reimbursement. This program doesn't work that way. This is a vendor reimbursement. So there is going to be basically a vendor rate, and it's a little bit different in that it's not cost reimbursement, there's not upfront funding, so you've got the issue of you're not getting upfront funding, and you really have to figure out how to work within a vendor payment system where you have to have your operating reserves, recognize that there's a lag time in getting payment, and also really probably upfront doing some good work around developing upfront your cost models for what your systems that you need to support this are what it's really going to cost you. And if you go onto the ADRC Technical Assistance website, there really are some very good costing and pricing models, and so I would recommend that you really look at those. In our preliminary planning, we did a lot of work doing some pricing and costing models to figure out what would be sustainable. And so earlier when somebody was asking the question about your caseload, you can think of it from two different perspectives. One is, what is the capacity of the staff to do the work? And so what's kind of your limitations? And that would be, like Jeannie said, 45 to 50 clients would really be a manageable caseload for an individual. But then you also probably need to look at, okay, what's the minimum caseload that we're going to need to cover our costs? And that's a different question. So you'll want to think of that as well. And we did some initial costing where we were thinking that we would need at least 15 clients to support a half of an FTE of a case manager. So that gives you a sense. And that was really looking at what does it really cost us with the personnel costs, the benefits, the materials and services, indirect, supervision, all those kinds of things. And then also the fact that you're going to have additional administrative burden with this program that you probably weren't anticipating. So are you going to need additional office assistant support, accounting support, things like that? The other lesson learned, I think, is that really understanding participant-directed service model. We've got some of those models in the state, but I don't know how many staff actually are working directly on a program that's really truly participant-directed. And I think there's a question.
The question is, so is this more like a fee-for-service, and is establishing the unit cost rate crucial?
Yeah, so the question is this more like a fee-for-service, and is establishing the your unit cost rate crucial? I would say yes, it is more fee-for-service. What's going to happen is there is a monthly budget for this for each veteran, and there will be a set amount that is available to you out of that monthly budget for the veteran. There's a set amount that's available to cover the cost of your service coordinator, your administrative costs, and the cost of the financial management service. So yes, it's basically fee for service. The other thing is really understanding fiscal management services, and that in the current model, there are a few states that are doing the fiscal management services on their own, but you're either going to have to develop a really kind of in-depth infrastructure to do that, which is very costly, or you have to have a statewide infrastructure that's already developed. The state of Washington already has done that and is running a lot of this through their state's Medicaid payment system. Or you're going to need to contract out for a financial management service, which is what we chose to do. So there will be some costs initially to set that up, and then that will be an additional part of the oversight and management that you'll have to do, and really understanding the role that those financial management services play. It really is a beneficial service for people. And if you've been tracking any of the conversations that have been going on in the state with the new private pay model that will be developed through the Home Care Commission, that conversation is modeled on the issues that are managed through a financial management service. That there are a lot of issues that employers, that when a consumer is the employer, there are a lot of issues that they have to address around paying all those, paying the bills, making sure that's done in an effective manner, and then also addressing things like workers' comp and the employment insurance and all those other issues. So just really understanding that model. And then just looking at, I'll repeat it again, building a realistic cost model. The other thing that was a lesson learned for us, and both we and Jennifer are working really closely with Nikisha, we anticipated when we were looking, if you end up participating in the ongoing conversations and looking at the rates that are available for this program, and they mentioned that we're going from a 4-tier model to I think it's 8 tiers. When we originally set up our tier model of the monthly reimbursement that the veteran gets, we were assuming that it would probably average out to be somewhere in the middle of those tiers. That isn't what actually happens. What we have found is these veterans have very high need levels, and that they end up being probably in the top 1/4 percentile of that tier level. And what is amazing to me is that many of them are on wait lists and are not really getting a lot of in-home services at this point. But, and so the VA feels a certain sense of urgency to get these folks served because, and it's really, that's brought home when they do the assessment and assign tier level to them, and they're in the top levels of need. So just to let you know that. And that's pretty much it for me.
Great. Okay, so everyone exhale. A lot of information. And let me just be the first to say thank you to Lee, to Jeannie, to Lynn, and to Jennifer McKenzie for their help, their leadership, and really just helping by sharing their lessons learned, sharing their process with us. Because as we look to expand this across the state, we're really going to be looking at these individuals to help us. They have tools, they have the experience, and I mean, they're fully on board with this. And I just want to say thank you all, because this work would be a lot more daunting without that experience, you know, and the information and guidance that you all are able to provide. Looks like another question came in.
Is the program open to service-connected VA clients or all VA clients?
All
VA clients. And actually, it's the VA Medical Center that determines eligibility for the program. And they do the initial assessment.
Great. So we're going to look at a little bit of some of our next steps. As I mentioned earlier, the VD-HCBS expansion is one of the deliverables under our current Enhanced Options Counseling Grant. And right now, we are in the process of developing a VD-HCBS expansion plan or proposal that will outline how we plan to expand this program across the state. And while we're putting together the statewide vision for this, it's really going to, the details are going to be fleshed out by some of these local and regional discussions that are going to be coming up as well. I wanted to say that we have a Veterans-Directed Home and Community-Based Services advisory group that meets on a monthly basis. We're also working closely with our federal partners and technical assistance leads to help inform this process. Once we have a draft, a more solid draft proposal, let me just say, the plan is then to work with our VAMCs and ADRCs to engage local and regional partners in planning discussions. Because again, what we're doing on the state level is trying to figure out a state vision for this work. Okay?
Question from Clackamas has a VVOC clinic, and they're wondering if those folks could also make eligibility determinations.
So we also have an outpatient clinic in Washington County. I know that there's one in Clackamas County. Those folks could work with the VA Medical Center if they saw someone that was in need that potentially isn't already on the radar of their VA Medical Center, but it's truly the VA Medical Center who makes that determination. We had talked about, in Washington County at least, doing some outreach to those clinics so that they were at least informed of the program. And those social workers there could, again, make referrals to the VA Medical Center. We've given them the contact name, but right now, of course, we're not expanding or able to add additional veterans. But certainly they could identify them, but the referral has to come from the VA Medical Center.
Another question is, does this service work with Medicaid, or is it a standalone, and is the expectation that Medicaid is pursued first before this program?
I don't know that they've determined that. It wouldn't work in conjunction with Medicaid. If someone was Medicaid eligible, they would stay on Medicaid and wouldn't be eligible for veteran-directed. It would be kind of a duplication. These services that, some of the services that the veteran is able to buy, of course, they want to make sure that it's not something that would be covered under their veteran medical plan. But no, I don't. It would be duplication to be on Medicaid and this program. At the same time, the veteran could choose to close their Medicaid and go on this program if that's because it is more relaxed in the services that they can choose, and there's more autonomy and self-direction. But again, since we're not able to add new veterans, we don't want to encourage anyone to drop their Medicaid to pursue this program at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll just wrap up the next steps. So the next meeting of our VD-HCBS Planning and Advisory Group is April 25th. We have a smaller work group that's been putting together a pretty broad proposal that we're going to bring to this larger group on the 25th of this month, with the goal and intention of really having a viable plan by mid-May. Okay? And just so I can give you just a little bit of an overview of what we're envisioning right now with regard to this VD-HCBS expansion plan, we're looking to expand and build from the current infrastructure that's available in our metro area through the program that's already existing. We also want to develop a plan to expand to other areas that are included within the Portland VAMC catchment area. And then while we're planning on sort of building that work from this metro area, from the metro area programs, we're also going to be planning in other areas of the state. And that's where you all get involved. That's where you all get engaged in local and regional discussions with the VAMCs located in the southern parts of the state. Again, the plan is still under development. We'll present something to the advisory group on the 25th of this month with the full intention of having something ready to at least have some local discussion around towards the middle of May. I will be meeting with some of our VAMC partners in the southern part of the state towards, within the next couple of weeks. And at that point, we'll also begin to have some discussions on who to engage and how to do that piece. But I just want to encourage you all, if you're interested in this, interested in learning more, reach out either to myself, and I can put you in contact with the VAMC that's closest to you, or the ADRC that are closest to you as well, as we're all going to be in the near future engaged in some discussions around this. Okay. So that's all I have. Are there any questions? I'm sure there are a lot of questions. I feel like each piece of this could have been its own webinar in a sense, and as we progress, we may see what some of the questions are coming up, what some of the topics that you all might be interested in really diving down into.
So feel free to, we'll leave the chat questions up for just a few more minutes in case there are other questions. Feel free to email Nikisha, and she can help your questions get answered. We weren't able to get Jennifer McKenzie on the webinar today, but she is available. We want to thank you guys for joining us, and remember to watch for an email shortly as soon as we close out the webinar from Lori Watt. And it will have a SurveyMonkey link in it so that you can let us know what you thought and how we can make the webinar better and future webinars better. So thanks again for your participation. We'll be watching. We do have a couple questions here. This was recorded. So yes, it was recorded, and it will be on the State Unit on Aging website probably by about the middle of next week or the first part. It takes a few days to get it on there, but we did record and it will go there. If you did not get a copy of the PowerPoint, we sent the PowerPoint out yesterday morning to all who had registered at that point. If you were one of the folks who registered after that, let Nikisha or myself, Sue-Ann Jackson, know, and we will get you a copy of the PowerPoint. When we post the recorded webinar, we will also post the PowerPoint on the State Unit on Aging website. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay. So we're not seeing any other questions in terms of content. They did reference the ADRC TAE website. And I don't know if you guys put the, did you guys put that link up there?
I did on my slide.
Okay.
Okay, so Jeannie said it was on one of her slides, and you guys should have all gotten the PowerPoint, so you should be able to see. They did reference a lot of materials on that website. Again, we want to thank you guys for joining us.
Great.
Have a great day.
And stay tuned.